I unexpectedly came home at noon without telling my husband in advance, and I unexpectedly saw, through the half-closed bedroom door, my husband with Winter, his close friend, on our love seat. I stood frozen when I heard my husband say, between heavy breaths, "I'd rather kiss the dog Daisy than kiss Melissa." Just before I quietly walked away, they noticed, and their faces turned pale. My name is Melissa Ward, 34 years old, a veterinarian and owner of Pine Hill Veterinary Care Clinic in Cambridge, Boston. My life used to revolve around abandoned cats, injured dogs, and the quiet cries of little souls in need of healing. I always thought of myself as lucky. I had a job I loved, a steady husband, and a warm home in Brookline. Until that afternoon, I left work early due to an unusual stomach pain. My stomach twisted, my head a bit dizzy, but all I could think about was getting home, lying down, and maybe having a simple lunch. As I drove closer to home, I furrowed my brows slightly. Franklin's SUV, my husband's, was already parked in the garage. Strange. At this hour, he was usually at the office until at least 3 in the afternoon. But the suspicion passed quickly, replaced by a small joy, the thought of having lunch with him. I smiled, my heart lightened, as if something warm was waiting for me ahead. I opened the door and stepped inside, softly calling his name. No response. In the silence, there was only the ticking of the wall clock and the lingering scent of an unfamiliar perfume in the air. I stepped carefully down the hallway and stopped. A sound. Soft. Broken. The sound of breathing and muffled giggles. My hand trembled as it touched the half-closed bedroom door. And then, everything inside me collapsed. Franklin, my husband, was with Winter, his best friend, on the love seat in our bedroom. Winter, who once brought in a cat with pneumonia to my clinic, whom I had once considered a friend, was there, on the same seat where my husband and I used to share sweet evenings together. I froze. I couldn't scream. I couldn't cry. I could only hear Franklin's voice, low and breathy. "I'd rather kiss the dog Daisy than kiss Melissa." Daisy, the dog I rescued from a garbage dump when she was close to death. That sentence pierced through me like a blade. 8 years of memories shattered like a glass thrown onto stone. I recalled the past few weeks, how he kept avoiding me, claiming to be tired, blaming work, even sleeping alone in the study. Now, everything made sense. As I stepped back, my foot accidentally hit the corner of the wooden table. The sound made Franklin turn. Our eyes met. He froze. His face turned pale, his mouth opening as if to say something, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. I turned away and walked out before he could stop me. I rushed down the stairs, opened the door, and drove off, though my hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the steering wheel. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away as far as possible. The Boston wind was so cold it stung my eyes, but I still didn't cry. I forced the tears back, as if letting them fall would make me crumble completely. My phone rang incessantly. I looked at the screen. Franklin calling, then Winter. I didn't answer, but they left voicemails. Franklin's voice pleading, "Melissa, please let me explain. You misunderstood. It wasn't as serious as it looked. I was just too drunk. A big client canceled the contract today, and I had too much to drink." Winter was just comforting me. Then came Winter's voice, choked and broken. "Melissa, please listen. I never meant to betray you. I was only there because Franklin was upset. I didn't know things would go that far. It's not love, just a moment of weakness." I turned on the speaker, listening in silence. Their voices echoed between the howling wind outside the car and the distant horns of Boston traffic. Every word they said sounded like a bad play, full of lies and fear. They wanted me to believe that betrayal was just an accident, an unserious one. I didn't respond. I just gripped the steering wheel tighter, and finally, the tears came, mixing with the rain that had begun to tap on the car windows. I drove to the park by the Charles River, where we had once celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary. I sat on the cold stone bench, stared at the misty water, and realized I had lost not just a husband, but also the most beautiful part of my trust. An elderly woman walked by with a white-haired dog, paused, and looked at me with gentle eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked. I nodded faintly. She smiled. "Don't cry for someone who doesn't value your love." That sentence felt like a touch to my heart. I nodded again, a faint smile forming, but inside, a decision had already been made. That night, I rented a small hotel room in Back Bay. The room looked out onto Beacon Street, the yellow lights reflecting off the windows. I sat there, silent for hours, staring at my own reflection, tired, in pain, but no longer wanting to run. I opened my notebook and wrote the first lines. Day 1, reclaiming control. And below that, a short list. Meet lawyer, hire private investigator, collect evidence, protect assets, protect myself. As I put the pen down, I knew my life had just taken a completely different turn, and this time, I would be the one rewriting the whole story. 3 days after I left home, I was still staying at the small hotel in Back Bay. Every morning, I woke up early, opened the window to watch Boston's crowds heading to work, and felt like a ghost. No longer a wife, no longer a friend, just a name adrift in chaos. Franklin still called. Every day. His messages overflowed with apologies, promises, and hollow lines like, "I can't live without you." I read them and felt nothing. Winter had vanished completely from social media, but I knew that kind of silence. It wasn't shame, it was calculation. And I needed truth, not guilt. That morning, I received a strange text from Nathan Collins, Winter's husband. Just one line. "I think we should talk. I have something you need to know." That one sentence made my heart sink. Nathan, the quiet, gentle man who always accompanied Winter to couple events. I still remembered his eyes during last year's Christmas dinner, eyes that knew something but chose silence. I called him back. His voice was low, tired. "Can we meet?" At Riverbean, Harvard Square. As soon as possible, the small cafe was tucked under a row of old brick walls, the scent of espresso mingling with the smell of baked cinnamon. I walked in and saw Nathan seated in the far corner. He looked thinner, the shadows under his eyes deeper, and his coffee cold. As I sat down, he quietly said, "I'm sorry for everything." I hesitated. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Nathan. We're just standing at opposite ends of the same truth." He gave a tired smile. "No, I knew about them before you did." My grip tightened. "What do you mean?" He pulled out an old phone and showed me a folder full of messages, conversations between Winter and Franklin going back nearly 6 months. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was deliberate, sustained, filled with coded language, rendezvous, and planning. He said, "They deceived us both." But that's not the worst part. I discovered a plan, one that chilled me. He opened a tablet, displaying screenshots of emails from Winter to Franklin. One line stood out. "If she loses credibility, we can buy the clinic. Call Dallas. He knows how to handle the small accident with the VIP client's cat." I read it and felt frozen. Small accident. They were talking about a living being, an innocent creature. I looked at Nathan. He nodded grimly. They were planning to orchestrate the death of a cat belonging to a high-profile client, then spread rumors your clinic was negligent. When your reputation collapsed, Franklin would come in as the rescuer and buy the practice at a low price. Winter would manage the PR. Do you understand? This isn't just betrayal. It's a plan to destroy you. I sat frozen, gripping my coffee cup until my fingers turned white. Faces of the animals I'd saved flashed through my mind, the sleepless nights, the thank you letters hung on the clinic walls. All of it, to them, just a business deal. Nathan looked at me and said slowly, "I didn't come to hurt you. I came because I can't stay silent anymore. Franklin and Winter think they're clever, that you'll collapse and I'll stay weak. But they forgot that the silent ones are the ones watching. I looked at him, my emotions tangled. Anger, sorrow, and a flicker of hope. For the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. I nodded. If you're ready to help, we can turn this around. I don't just want to expose them, I want the truth out. Nathan took a deep breath. I've prepared everything. I have copies of their messages and their financial plan to take the clinic. He handed me a USB drive. When it touched my palm, it felt like holding a fuse. Small, silent, but powerful enough to blow apart every lie. I set down my cup and looked out the window. Rain fell softly on the brick street. I said, my voice calm and cold, I won't let them decide my worth. Thank you, Nathan. From now on, we're no longer just victims. He gave a tired but real smile. Then let's begin. As I stepped out of the cafe, the wind hit hard against my cheek, bitterly cold. But I had found an ally, and stepped into a battle I knew I would win, not through fury, but with precision. Since the meeting at Riverbean, Nathan and I stayed in regular contact. We used encrypted emails and secure apps to share documents. Nathan continued living with Winter, pretending to forgive her, while secretly recording calls and copying emails and texts between her and Franklin. He told me, "She thinks I'm weak. But the more I play the fool, the clearer I see who they really are." I knew he was enduring pain, but we both understood. Silence was a strategy, not surrender. On Monday morning, I decided to meet Lucia Harrington, a lawyer recommended by an old friend. Her office was on the 22nd floor of a glass tower on Boylston Street, overlooking Boston. Lucia came out to greet me, around 45, slender build, silver-streaked hair tied back, her eyes calm but sharp as blades. When I sat down, she placed a black coffee in front of me and said softly, "Ready to talk?" I told her everything. The affair, Nathan's messages, the plan to destroy the clinic's reputation. Lucia didn't interrupt. She simply took notes, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she clasped her hands together and said firmly, "The first thing you need to do is draw your legal lines. I'll help you draft a post-nuptial agreement to protect all your assets and the full ownership of Pine Hill Veterinary Care. If Franklin wants to reconcile, he'll sign. If not, you still win," I sighed. "He won't sign if he knows the real reason." Lucia smiled faintly. "He'll sign. Men like Franklin only trust what they believe they control. You just need to give him that illusion." Then she looked me in the eye. "Melissa, when a man cheats, he's not just taking your trust. He's testing whether you'll fight back. And if you don't, he'll believe you deserved it." I sat in silence. Her words struck deep, not because they hurt, but because they were true. I'd trusted too much, been too gentle. Now I had to use the same intellect I used to heal others, to save myself. Lucia opened another folder and pointed to documents I needed: financial statements, my veterinary license, lease agreements, and tax returns. "We'll move everything temporarily into a personal trust, under your name and an independent trustee. We'll use Massachusetts laws protecting personal businesses in marriage. Think of it as a strategic relocation." I nodded and started taking detailed notes. For the first time in weeks, I felt my breathing steady. No more chaos, no more being pushed into corners. I was writing the rules now. The meeting lasted over an hour. As I stood to leave, Lucia placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Melissa, you heal the voiceless. Now, learn to heal yourself, with reason, not sympathy." Stepping out of the building, the wind from the Charles River blew my hair back. I opened my phone and began recording all incoming calls from Franklin, saving every message to a separate drive and sending a backup to Lucia. I even installed a small recorder in the clinic, in case Winter or anyone tried to interfere. That evening, I opened my laptop and created a folder titled Recovery Plan. Inside were 3 new files: legal documents, evidence, Franklin and Winter, and next steps. I stuck a note on my screen: control. Don't react. At that moment, I understood. To reclaim freedom, I didn't need to scream or retaliate in pain. I just had to let them fall into their own trap. And the first thing I needed was proof. I returned to Pine Hill Veterinary Care on Thursday morning, after nearly a week off, under the pretense of recovering my health. As the glass door swung open, the familiar mix of antiseptic and coffee from the front desk greeted me. Everything looked normal, but I knew, from now on, every corner of this place would be a battleground. Sienna, my assistant, rushed over, her eyes a mix of relief and worry. "Dr. Melissa, I'm so glad you're back. There's something I think you should know." I looked at the young woman, her hands tightly clutching a file. "Tell me, Sienna." She swallowed hard, lowering her voice. "2 days ago, Franklin came to the clinic. He said you were sick and had authorized him to collect a few client contract files. I thought it was odd. He's never gotten involved with the clinic before, but he was confident and he had a printed email with your signature." I remained silent. One word lit up in my mind: forgery. Sienna continued. "I secretly checked the security footage. Here." She opened her laptop and pulled up a video. On screen, Franklin in a long coat and sunglasses, heading straight for the back archive. He discreetly opened a cabinet, pulled out files, took photos with his phone, and quickly slipped them into his bag. As he exited, a woman in a gray coat, unfamiliar, was waiting in the parking lot. She received a small USB from his hand. I stared at the screen, my heart slowing, each beat icy cold. "He didn't just betray me, he's stealing our client's trust." Sienna nodded quietly. I backed up the footage to a separate drive, password protected. "If you want, I can send it to your lawyer." I took her hand and gave it a light squeeze. "Thank you, Sienna. Keep this between us. From now on, anyone asking about me, don't say a word." She nodded, her gaze more resolute. "I understand. I'm on your side that night." As Boston glowed under warm yellow lights, I sat in my small hotel room and replayed Franklin's video frame by frame. The hum of city traffic blended with the steady beat of my heart. No longer chaotic. I placed the USB into an envelope, sealed it, and sent it overnight to Lucia Harrington. With it, a short note. "They've started playing dirty." "I'm ready, around 10 p.m., Lucia called back, her voice as calm as ever. "Good, Melissa. Now you have visual evidence. But don't rush. You don't need to strike first. In law, timing outweighs evidence. Let them confess on their own. That's how you win, not just in court, but in yourself." I listened silently, eyes fixed on the window. The reflection of street lamps shimmered on the glass, revealing a woman staring back, no longer broken, no longer grieving. "Lucia," I said, "I'm not seeking revenge. I just want the truth to do its job." She replied, "And it will, when you're patient enough." I nodded, set the phone down, turned off the lights, and let the faint blue glow of the laptop screen fill the room. In the darkness, I heard the clock ticking, each beat soft yet firm, like the footsteps of justice drawing near. 2 days later, I received a message from Franklin. Just one conversation. "One chance, Melissa." I was wrong. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before typing back. "All right. Oakview, 7 p.m. Oakview, the restaurant where we celebrated our 4th anniversary." That night, he had given me a bouquet of white roses and whispered, "I love the peace in you." Now I chose that very place, to see how much of his so-called peace remained. That evening, Boston lay beneath a soft layer of mist. I wore a simple cream dress, hair neatly pinned, and the same small silver earrings I used to wear on clinic days. When I walked in, I saw Franklin already seated at our old corner table. He looked thinner, scruffy-bearded, shirt wrinkled, yet still forced a smile, as if that could erase everything. "Thank you for coming," he said hoarsely. I gave a small nod. "You said you needed to explain." Franklin sighed, clenching his hands, eyes fixed on the table. I know you saw everything. I won't make excuses. That day, I drank too much. The past month's been hell. Major clients dropped out. My mind's been a mess. Winter came to comfort me, and things got out of hand. I remained silent. My composure clearly unsettled him. I know it was terrible. I regret it every day. We were just friends. I don't love her, Melissa. Not at all. I just felt weak, just wanted someone to listen, just that once. I was wrong, I tilted my head, my voice soft, as if speaking to an anxious patient. And you think a canceled contract gave you the right to destroy 8 years of trust? He lowered his head, voice cracking. I don't know what to say besides, I'm sorry. I just want a second chance. I'll do anything to prove I'm sorry. I paused for a long moment. Then, I pulled a white envelope from my bag and placed it before him. You said anything, right? Franklin looked at me and nodded eagerly. Yes. Anything to fix this marriage. I slid the envelope toward him. Then sign this. A post-nuptial agreement. Lucia, my lawyer, drafted it. If you truly want to start over, sign it. It's just a way to ensure you won't repeat your mistakes. He looked at me, suspicious. You hired a lawyer? I smiled faintly. You once told me, trust without terms is just fleeting emotion. I'm applying that now. Franklin opened the document, skimmed the first few lines. I knew he wouldn't read closely. That's who he was. Overconfident, dismissive, certain I'd always be soft. He grabbed the pen and signed. Done, he said with a sigh, then reached for my hand. I know you still love me, Melissa. I see it in your eyes. I let his hand rest for a moment, then gently pulled away. Everyone deserves a chance to make things right. He frowned, puzzled. I smiled, stood, collected the document, and slipped it back into my bag. Thanks for signing. Things will be much clearer from now on. I left him sitting there, surrounded by candlelight and the distant sound of a cello. As I stepped out into the sharp Boston wind, I stood on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. In my bag, the freshly signed post-nuptial agreement held a clause that stated any act of deceit, manipulation, or financial misconduct would trigger civil penalties and forfeiture of shared assets. Franklin had just signed his name into a perfect legal trap. And the cruelest irony? His own story of drunken weakness gave me every reason to set it. I turned and walked into the Boston night, a faint smile flickering across my lips. For the first time, I felt no need to retaliate, because I knew the truth stood with me, and he had just signed the beginning of his own downfall. The next morning, I received an envelope from Joseph Hale, the private investigator Lucia had recommended. Inside was a full report on Franklin's past, neatly organized, chilling, and full of fragments I had never known. The first page read, Elaine Ward versus Robert Ward, divorce file, Essex County, 1997. Franklin's father, Robert Ward, had cheated on his wife with a company employee. His mother, Elaine, divorced him when Franklin was 10. Since then, the boy had lived caught between love and resentment. He loathed his father's betrayal, yet grew up to become his mirror image. A brief note from his school psychology report read, emotionally unstable, strong possessive behavior, tendency to replicate paternal patterns. I read, my heart heavy. And then came the lines that left me frozen. At age 18, Franklin had a sexual relationship with Amy, his 16-year-old cousin, resulting in a pregnancy. Her family threatened legal action for statutory rape, but Franklin's mother, Elaine, secretly paid a large settlement, $50,000 at the time, in exchange for silence. 4 years later, during his senior year in college, Franklin had an affair with Michaela, a married professor. The relationship ended only after her husband found out, filed a complaint with the university, and forced Franklin to transfer schools to avoid disciplinary action. I sat still, feeling like I was reading a recycled script, one where every generation of warred men rewrote the same sin, just with new settings. Lucia called, her voice steady. Franklin despised his father, yet he's living out the same life. A child raised in betrayal either fears becoming the betrayer or becomes him, I replied softly, and Franklin chose the second. I closed the file and looked out the window. Morning light filtered through the Boston curtains, casting streaks like boundaries between past and present. Inside, I felt no more rage, only clarity. He hadn't accidentally betrayed me. He was repeating a legacy carved deep into his blood. I texted Lucia. I understand now. I want to know the origin of the other one. She replied, Winter? I think her husband is quietly digging into her past too. I set my phone down and inhaled deeply. A clear thought rose within me. To end this cycle, I couldn't merely punish them. I had to bring the truth to light, so the pattern of pain could stop with me. That afternoon, I met Nathan again at Riverbean. He brought a thin file, quietly saying, I think you should know, not for sympathy, but to understand why she chose that path. Inside were a few old photos of Sylvia Collins, Winter's mother, a nurse at a doctor's clinic who had been in an affair with a married physician for 3 years. When Sylvia became pregnant, the man disappeared, leaving her with an illegitimate child and not a word of remorse. Winter was raised in bitterness, with the only lesson her mother ever passed down. Men only stay with the woman who makes them feel special. I understood. She had learned to love wrongly from a woman who had once loved wrongly too. 2 entries in the file made my blood run cold. In her senior year of high school, Winter had an affair with Jackson, the father of her best friend. The relationship only ended when they were caught in a hotel, discovered by that very friend and her mother. Years later, during her internship, Winter again fell into an affair with Tristan, her married supervisor, which lasted 9 months before his wife found out, and he fired Winter in exchange for forgiveness. I read all this, and my heart sank. Not from hatred, but from the realization. Winter hadn't just ruined someone else's marriage. She was reliving her mother's tragedy, believing that she'd only be seen if she could possess a man who already belonged to someone else. Lucia once said, "Those who hurt others are often the ones who've never been healed." Now I understood. Winter didn't just want to steal my husband. She was trying to reclaim the image of a father she never had, and Franklin, sadly, was the perfect man for that role. I closed the file and told Nathan, "I'm not here to forgive. I just need to end this." He nodded. End the cycle that began with them. With truth. As I left the cafe, the rain had started to fall. Droplets clung to the glass window, like threads of memory, reminding me that healing always begins by looking straight into the root of the wound. That night, I returned to my hotel in Back Bay. The Boston rain still fell, mist-like drops blurring the window pane with a soft haze. In the small room, lit only by a dim desk lamp, I sat down and opened my notebook. For the first time since everything began, I wrote, not to vent, but to see the story from outside my pain. I drew 2 parallel columns and wrote Franklin's name on the left, Winter's on the right. Beneath each, I jotted brief clinical notes like a psychiatrist annotating trauma. Franklin, feared becoming his father, repeated betrayal. Winter, longed to be seen by her father, pursued married men. I stared at those lines for a long time, as if facing 2 mirrored souls. A man who betrayed because he feared his past, and a woman who stole love to feel loved. Neither of them truly loved anyone. They were both running from childhood wounds, and in their flight, they used me like an obstacle to trample over in order to feel worthy. I closed my eyes and recalled what Lucia had said in our first meeting. Those who hurt others are often the ones who've never been healed. Back then, I thought it was just philosophical comfort. Now it echoed in me like a brutal truth. I had seen it. They were not monsters, only children who grew up in dark houses. now fumbling to relight a candle, even if it meant burning others. I turned to a new page and wrote in firm strokes, "I will not let their past define my present. I will end the cycle, with truth, not hatred." I closed the notebook and set the pen down. In the mirror's reflection, my face no longer looked lost. It held the stillness of someone who had finally seen through the illusions. Outside, the rain fell harder. I stood and drew back the curtains, gazing down at the streetlights. People still walked, cars still passed. Life went on, and I understood. The world never pauses for anyone's pain. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel pain anymore. There was only one thing left to do: bring the truth into the light. 2 weeks later, I sent out invitations for the celebration of my 8th wedding anniversary with Franklin. The invitation was elegant, gold-edged white background, listing the venue. The Grand Ivy Hotel, Boston, 18th floor ballroom. No one knew that this event wasn't a celebration. It was a courtroom of truth I had built myself. Franklin protested violently when he saw the guest list. "Are you insane? Why would you invite Winter and Nathan? You want to turn our anniversary into a farce?" I only smiled and replied gently, "I just thought we should have everyone who's been part of our lives present. I want to start fresh, remember?" He hesitated, then nodded. He thought I had softened. He believed silence from a woman meant forgiveness. He didn't know I was silent because I was listening to the truth approaching. In the days of preparation, Lucia and Sienna came to the hotel to help. We rented a private meeting room next to the ballroom, where Lucia set up a small projection system and reviewed the USB, containing all the evidence. Franklin breaking into the file room, the messages detailing their plan to discredit the clinic, and the recorded conversation between me and Franklin at Oakview. Lucia placed a hand on my shoulder and said calmly, "When the truth is revealed, you don't need to shout. Let it speak for you, Sienna." The once shy assistant had become a pillar of strength. She helped organize the documents, arrange seating, and test every device. At one point, she looked at me, eyes tinged with concern. "Are you sure you're ready to see them in the same room?" I smiled, steady. "I've already seen the worst. Everything from now on is just truth." Meanwhile, Nathan continued his role as the forgiving husband. He messaged Winter, subtly feeding her the illusion that Franklin was leaving me for her. The conversations were archived by Lucia as proof of motive and conspiracy. Nathan told me over the phone, "She believes it now. She thinks Franklin will choose her, and this event is where he'll make it official." I replied quietly, "Let them reveal themselves. When people think they're about to win, they drop their masks." On the final night before the event, I sat in the hotel room, gazing out at the city lights. Boston shimmered, traffic flowing like a constellation of moving stars. I opened the USB again and replayed the videos, the evidence. Each frame was once a blade. But now, it didn't hurt anymore. It only reminded me how far I'd come. At 11 p.m., I closed the laptop and exhaled deeply. Tomorrow, it would all end. Not with tears, but with light. That evening, the Grand Ivy Ballroom glowed with white flowers, golden candles, and soft jazz music. Everyone was dressed to the nines, believing they were attending a wedding anniversary celebration, unaware they were about to witness a courtroom of truth. I entered wearing an ivory gown, long and elegant, its V neckline revealing the silver necklace Franklin had once given me on our first anniversary. The room fell silent as I walked through. Franklin stood near the podium, clinging to a forced smile. Winter, in a navy blue dress, sat in the back row, her eyes flickering between nervousness and confidence, as if she truly believed tonight Franklin would finally claim her. When the MC invited me on stage, I took the microphone and walked slowly under the lights. The music stopped. I raised my glass and spoke with a voice soft but unyielding. "Thank you all for being here. 8 years of marriage is long enough to understand. Some truths can't stay hidden under the spotlight forever." A few chuckled, mistaking it for a poetic opening. But seconds later, the screen behind me lit up. First, a video. Franklin entering the records room, handing off a USB to a stranger. Gasps rippled through the hall. Then the screen shifted to a series of messages. Winter. After the clinic collapses, we'll buy it. You'll be her savior, Franklin. Handle the media. I'll get her to sign. The air turned thick. Guests began inching away from Franklin's table. But I didn't stop. I clicked the remote, voice steady. And here's what they hid for far longer. Not just betrayal of a wife, but betrayal of basic human decency. The screen switched. Franklin Ward, 2008. Age 18. Relationship with underage cousin, resulting in pregnancy. Case settled privately. A stunned murmur swept the room. Then a photo from 2012, captioned, Affair with married professor. Transferred schools after complaint. Franklin's face drained of color. His grip on the wineglass turned his knuckles white. I said nothing, just looked at him. Then the slide changed again. Winter Collins, 2010. High school student, affair with best friend's father, caught in hotel. Another wave of whispers. Final slide. 2017 internship. 9-month affair with married director, ended when exposed. Wife filed for divorce. Now they understood. This wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a pattern, born of wounded psychology. Nathan stepped up calmly. I'm Winter's husband. I'm sorry, but this isn't just personal. This is a pattern of two people who were once betrayed, becoming betrayers themselves. He plugged in another USB, and the screen showed more messages. Winter. She's too soft to suspect. Just pretend a few more months, Franklin. I know how to get her to sign. The ballroom fell silent. Franklin looked down, hands shaking. Winter buried her face in her hands, tears streaking her makeup. Franklin tried to speak. Melissa, I was pulled in, I replied, voice composed, eyes cold but clear. You said you'd rather kiss a dog than kiss me. Well, I'd rather embrace freedom than hold on to a liar. A sharp crash. His glass shattered on the floor, scattering under the lights like shards of the love he once pretended to protect. Winter collapsed into her chair, sobbing. I just wanted to be loved. I looked at her, voice low, not bitter, just final. Step out of your mother's shadow, Winter. If you truly want love, stop stealing someone else's. At the back of the room, Lucia nodded. Everything had been recorded, legal, intact. I placed the mic down and stepped off the stage. Franklin called out, choking, Melissa, I can explain. I stopped, didn't turn. No need. The light already did. I walked out of the silent ballroom, each step echoing on marble floors. Every footfall a period ending 8 years of deception. The next morning, I woke up in my temporary apartment in Brookline to a phone vibrating nonstop. The news had spread across local media. A bold headline on the Boston Daily Chronicle read, Insurance agent Franklin Ward under investigation for alleged financial misconduct and conspiracy against Boston Vet Clinic. Within hours, his company issued a statement suspending him pending internal investigation. They cited potential conflicts of interest and ethical violations. I read it not with satisfaction, but with quiet closure, like a wound finally stitched shut. Winter's fate was different. The media descended on her like vultures. Leaked texts and videos of her entering the records room circulated online. She was dropped from 2 major PR contracts. One video showed her crying on Nathan's doorstep. But no one was listening anymore. The spotlight she had once craved now pinned her down with no escape. Lucia worked tirelessly for the next 48 hours. She filed a civil lawsuit with the Suffolk County Court, demanding compensation for reputational harm, emotional damage, and lost revenue at Pine Hill Veterinary Care. Every piece of evidence, USBS, videos, messages, was formally submitted. When I signed the case file, Lucia said, They can run from love, but not from the law. At the same time, something moved me far more. Mrs. Ellie, a 68-year-old client who once brought in her heartsick dog, Buddy, wrote an open letter to the Boston Herald. If Dr. Melissa had ever done wrong, I wouldn't still have Buddy beside me. She saved him and restored my faith in people. The letter spread faster than the scandal. Old clients returned, sending flowers and letters of support. Pine Hill's doors reopened after 2 weeks, its lights burning bright again. Every thank you card was a patch mending the trust that Franklin and Winter tried to tear apart. That afternoon, Franklin showed up outside my hotel. His shirt was wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes, clutching a bouquet of white roses. He stood in silence for a moment, then spoke with a trembling voice. "I've lost everything, Melissa. My job, my name, all of it. I know I deserve this. But please, forgive me. I don't want it to end like this." I looked at him for a long time. In that moment, I no longer saw the man who had hurt me, just a lost soul begging to be rescued. I answered, softly but firmly, "Franklin, I'm done healing anyone but myself." He froze, lips parting to say something more. But I quietly closed the door. No screams, no scenes, only silence. The silence of finality. The next day, I went to Lucha's office and signed the divorce papers. Ink seeped into the white page, slowly marking the end of 8 years together. When I finished, Lucia asked, "Any final words you'd like me to include?" I smiled. "No. I think he's heard enough." That afternoon, I returned to our old home. It was quiet, eerily tidy. I took down our wedding photo, packed it with a few keepsakes. When I locked the door, I didn't look back. Outside, autumn sunlight spilled gold across the sidewalk. I walked away, unburdened, like someone finally unchained. There was no triumphant victory, only the dignified stillness I had reclaimed after 8 long years of loss. 6 months had passed since that night at the Grand Ivy. Spring had come to Boston, and the trees lining Beacon Hill had begun to bud. I sat in the small office of Pine Hill Veterinary Care, watching sunlight stream through the windows, casting warm beams over the wall of photos, portraits of cats and dogs we'd saved. Life was strangely peaceful now, but beneath it, I knew the wheel of karma still turned, slowly and precisely. Franklin lost his job 3 months after the party. The internal investigation revealed he'd signed multiple invalid insurance contracts using client information for personal gain. The company issued a termination notice and demanded reimbursement for damages. Those who once called him a model man now avoided his gaze on the street. I heard he'd moved back in with his parents in Salem, hiding from the eyes of the world. A man who once believed he was above morality now had to bow before the very rules he used to dismiss. Winter, on the other hand, fell into a cycle she might never escape. She began dating a businessman in New York, 15 years her senior, married. The media speculated, then broke the story. He had betrayed her, too. Headlines called her the woman who always seeks love in the wrong place. I read it not with schadenfreude, but with sadness. Perhaps her wounds had never truly healed. And sometimes, you don't need to punish someone, because they've already done that to themselves. Nathan's path was different. He won the divorce case, gaining custody of his 6-year-old daughter, Amelie. One warm summer afternoon, he called me. His voice was calm and gentle. "Amelie's learning to draw. She said she wants to draw you, the woman who saved her dad from silence. Thank you, Melissa, for choosing truth over hate." I smiled, eyes stinging. "I didn't save you, Nathan. The truth saved both of us. As for me, I'm still here, in this small clinic nestled under tree-lined streets of Brookline. But Pine Hill Veterinary Care is no longer just a clinic. I've started a small weekend training program for vet students and volunteers called Ethics and Compassion in Veterinary Practice. I teach them not just how to save lives, but how to keep their hearts from growing numb in the face of ingratitude. I tell them, no one can truly hurt you if you're grateful for having seen their true face. After every class, I go to the backyard, where there stands a small statue of a Labrador named Max, the first animal I ever saved. Under it, I had inscribed, "Loyalty never betrays. Only humans forget." As I water the flowers around that statue, a quiet peace seeps in. I'm no longer the woman who was betrayed. I'm the woman who chose to walk away from the cycle of pain. Somewhere out there, Franklin and Winter are paying for what they did. But I don't think of them much anymore. I think of the morning light through my windows, the patter of small paws across the floors, and the relief of knowing this. I won, not through revenge, but through compassion and freedom. A year later, I sold part of my shares in Pine Hill Veterinary Care to found the Paw Hearts Foundation, a rescue fund for abandoned pets and underprivileged children who love animals. I wanted to spend the rest of my life healing, not just myself, but the fragile beings who needed a gentle hand. My first field mission took me to South America, to a small suburb of Venezuela. There, children lived in tin-roofed wooden homes, clutching skinny dogs like they were their whole world. I worked with a team of volunteers to set up a temporary animal shelter and teach the children how to care for their companions. One hot afternoon, while handing out disinfectants, I heard a faint sound from behind a pile of trash. A tiny, dust-covered kitten peeked out, trembling, with round gray eyes staring up at me. I picked it up, brushed off the grime, gently touched the wound on its paw. It nuzzled into my palm and let out a soft purr. I smiled, an abandoned soul, looking for something to believe in. In its eyes, I saw myself a year ago, wounded, cast aside, yet still believing in kindness. I named it Chance, for its second chance. That evening, during our volunteer team dinner, an American man named Michael Rivers, part of the medical group, handed me a small roadside bouquet. Nothing fancy, just wild daisies wrapped in brown paper. He smiled. "These were the first flowers to bloom after yesterday's storm. I thought you should have them." I accepted them with a quiet smile. Not a promise, not a beginning, just the peace of two strangers sharing a moment of light in a foreign land. One evening in Venezuela, as the electricity went out, I sat alone in a small wooden cabin, lit only by the flickering glow of a candle and the soft sound of rain falling on the tin roof outside. I opened the old wooden box I had brought from Boston. Inside was a letter I had written to myself on the very first night after leaving Franklin. The paper had yellowed, the folds worn and familiar, but the words remained sharp and unblurred. If someone says they'd rather kiss a dog than kiss you, thank them, because they just gave you your freedom. I read it again and smiled, not with the bitterness of past wounds, but with the quiet recognition of a woman who had come to understand. Freedom doesn't mean leaving someone, it means knowing when something no longer deserves a place in your life. I folded the letter gently and held it over the candle flame. The paper caught fire, its words curling, fading, dissolving into smoke that floated out through the open window. It wasn't an act of resentment, nor regret. It was simply a final farewell to the version of me that once stayed too long. When the flame went out, I looked up and saw Chance, the little gray kitten, curled peacefully at my feet, and I listened to the soft rhythm of the rain above. And in that quiet moment, I knew with absolute clarity, I had finally, truly healed. One early morning, I drove my old Jeep down a coastal road in Venezuela, the horizon glowing with the golden shimmer of sunrise spilling over the ocean. The wind tangled my hair as I drove, and beside me, Chance lay curled on the passenger seat, his soft eyes turned toward me in quiet trust. I turned on the radio, and a classic Fleetwood Mac song played, a melody that seemed made for those who had been broken, but had never let their hope die. In the calm, I spoke in voiceover, steady and serene. Betrayal didn't destroy me. It taught me who to trust, and when to let go. I pulled the Jeep to a stop by the beach, stepped out, and let my bare feet sink into the cool tide lapping at the shore. In front of me, the sun was descending into the sea. Not an ending, but a gentle, golden beginning of something freer. I lifted Chance into my arms, and he nestled into my chest, purring quietly into the sea breeze. That image, a woman holding a rescued soul under a setting sun, between the vast ocean and the open sky, became the final symbol of my journey. Kindness, unbroken by betrayal, still intact despite everything. The screen slowly darkened. The Paw Hearts Foundation logo appeared, followed by the words, "Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain." The sound of waves continued in the background, merging with the soft closing melody, a gentle reminder that sometimes the most powerful revenge is to live with grace, to live with light, and to never let darkness reach your heart again. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it so that more women are reminded every pain can find its way to the light. Thank you for listening to Melissa's story, the woman who chose truth over hate and compassion over vengeance.
Turns out, reading your own obituary over your morning coffee is quite the appetite suppressant. There I was, sitting in my sister Iris's kitchen in Vermont, scrolling through the Bedford Falls Gazette on my iPad like any normal Tuesday, when I nearly choked on my avocado toast. According to page 6, Marlo Calloway, that's me, had died tragically and unexpectedly over the weekend. I blinked 3 times, wondering if Vermont's organic coffee had hallucinogenic properties I wasn't aware of. The obituary was surprisingly eloquent for someone who couldn't even bother to text me that I was dead. My darling husband Fletcher had apparently been devastated by the sudden loss, but was finding strength in community support. The photo they used was from our trip to Napa 5 years and 15 pounds ago. At least my fictional death had good optics. "Iris!" I screamed, nearly toppling my sister's farmhouse chic bar stool. "Fletcher killed me off!" My sister came running in from her yoga room, still in downward dog position. "What the hell are you talking about?" I thrust the iPad into her hands. "Apparently I died. Very tragic. People are bringing casseroles as we speak." Iris's eyes widened as she scanned the article. "Holy shit, Marlo! This is detailed." It was indeed comprehensive. Marlo Calloway, 38, beloved editor-in-chief of Hudson Valley Style magazine, devoted wife to Fletcher Calloway, passionate advocate for local businesses, and failed plant mom. Okay, they didn't include that last part, but everything else was spot on. The celebration of life was scheduled for Saturday at the Riverside Community Center. How thoughtful of my husband to plan my funeral while I was still using my lungs. "Should we call the paper or the police?" Iris asked, already reaching for her phone. "Wait," I said, suddenly remembering something that made my blood run colder than my now-forgotten oat milk latte. Our life insurance policy. The one Fletcher insisted we upgrade last month. It just went into effect yesterday. The one for $1.5 million, I finished, feeling like I was in some twisted Lifetime movie where the husband was both the villain and incredibly bad at villainy. And his little intern Aubrey started bringing him lunch every day last month. Homemade lunch. Who makes homemade lunch for their boss? Serial killers and homewreckers, that's who. I grabbed my phone to check our home security app. The one Fletcher always complained was an unnecessary invasion of privacy. There they were, in our kitchen, drinking champagne. My champagne? The Moet I'd been saving for my promotion announcement? Are they celebrating? Iris gasped, peering over my shoulder. They absolutely were. Fletcher was popping the cork while Aubrey, with her perfect Gen Z skin and middle part, arranged cheese on my West Elm serving board. In my house, with my allegedly grieving husband, while I was supposedly decomposing somewhere. "Turn up the volume," Iris whispered, unnecessarily. We were both already leaning toward the phone like it was about to reveal the meaning of life. "Just need to wait for the insurance verification," Fletcher was saying, his voice slightly slurred. "Warren Griffin from Regional Life called today. Standard procedure," he said. "How long will that take?" Aubrey asked, sliding her hand over my countertop in a way that suggested she was already mentally redecorating. "A week, maybe less. Then we're golden, babe. New start, new life." New life? I had apparently traded mine in without even getting the coupon. That's when an idea hit me with the force of a suburban mom spotting a Target clearance sale. I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. I wasn't going to storm home and confront them. No. I was going to stay dead. For now. Iris, I said slowly, a plan forming that would make even the messiest Housewives episode look tame. I need to borrow your laptop, and maybe your black dress. The funeral one? Exactly. I smiled, feeling a surge of something between rage and exhilaration. If Fletcher wants to mourn me so badly, I'll give him something to really cry about. I spent the next hour making 3 phone calls. One to my boss explaining I needed an emergency week of remote work, family emergency, not technically a lie. One to Warren Griffin at Regional Life Insurance, who was very confused to hear from a dead person. And one to Detective Noah Sinclair, who came highly recommended for catching cheating spouses. By Thursday, I had a plan that would make Fletcher's betrayal look like a kindergarten-level scheme. He wanted me dead? Fine. But the thing about the dead is, sometimes they come back. And when they do, they bring receipts, witnesses, and a vengeance that would make even the most dramatic daytime soap opera writers take notes. If Fletcher wanted to play dead, I'd show him what a real funeral looked like. His careers. Staying dead was surprisingly productive. No meetings, no small talk, no pretending to care about Karen from accounting's keto journey. Just me, my laptop, and the meticulous documentation of my husband's spectacular betrayal from my sister's guest bedroom turned command center. He's updated his LinkedIn, Iris announced Wednesday morning, hunched over her MacBook like we were CIA agents tracking a terrorist. Who updates LinkedIn when they're grieving? I leaned over to look. Fletcher Calloway had indeed updated his professional profile, with a somber black ribbon emoji and a heartfelt post about navigating profound personal loss while finding strength in professional purpose. It had 347 sympathetic reactions and 89 comments, including one from Aubrey that read, "Your resilience inspires us all. Here for you always." Here for you always? I snorted. She's been here for him since she started bringing homemade quinoa bowls to the office. Nothing says I want to replace your wife like meal prep. The most revolting part? People from our shared social circle were commenting with heart emojis and prayer hands, including Monica Lawson, my supposed best friend since college, who had texted me exactly 0 times to verify that I was, in fact, deceased. What kind of friend doesn't even call to make sure you're actually dead? I asked Iris, who was refilling my wine glass with her fancy Oregon Pinot Noir. It was barely noon, but conventional drinking hours don't apply when you're legally dead. The kind who's been sleeping with your husband, Iris said casually, like she was commenting on the weather. I choked on my wine. What? Oh, please. That whole business trip to Scottsdale last year? Monica was mysteriously at a conference the same weekend, and they came back with identical Southwestern silver jewelry. The memory hit me like a Peloton instructor's peppy demands for just one more push. Fletcher had returned with a silver bracelet he claimed was from a local artisan market, while Monica had shown off eerily similar earrings at our book club the following week. That jewelry-matching snake, I muttered, opening our home security app to check on the current state of affairs. Fletcher was in our bedroom, my bedroom, sorting through my clothes with Aubrey, who was holding up my favorite Eileen Fisher sweater against her annoyingly toned body. Is he giving away my clothes already? My voice went up 3 octaves. That cashmere was from the Nordstrom anniversary sale. Turn up the volume, Iris said, leaning in with the intensity of a suburban mom at a PTA meeting about controversial library books. Don't think black is really her color, Aubrey was saying, tossing my sweater aside like it was from Target clearance. But this might work for the memorial. Appropriately somber, but still, me. Take whatever you want, Fletcher replied, his voice dripping with the generosity of someone giving away things that weren't his. Marlo would have wanted her things to be appreciated. Oh, I absolutely would not, I hissed at the screen. She had good taste in some things, Aubrey continued, moving to my jewelry box with the precision of a surgeon approaching a heart transplant. My actual heart was pounding as she opened it. her perfectly manicured fingers hovering over my grandmother's pearl necklace. But her style was a bit mature for me, she added, closing the box with a dismissive snap that made me want to reach through the screen and snatch her middle part right off her head. You're 11 years younger and 2 dress sizes smaller. We get it, I muttered, taking another gulp of wine. The doorbell rang on screen. Fletcher looked momentarily panicked, like someone who had just remembered they were supposed to be in mourning, not hosting a closet raid. That's probably another casserole, he said, straightening his deliberately rumpled grieving husband Oxford shirt. Wait here. He left, and Aubrey immediately dove for my vanity, trying on my Tom Ford lipstick, the $58 one I bought myself as a birthday splurge. She took a selfie, then started rifling through my bedside drawer. Oh my God, check my nightstand, I told the screen, as if Aubrey could hear my warnings. I dare you. She pulled out my journal, the leather-bound one where I'd been documenting Fletcher's growing disinterest in our marriage for the past 6 months. Her eyes widened as she flipped through it, landing on what I presumed were my detailed entries about suspecting he was having an affair. She quickly stuffed it into her oversized tote bag just as Fletcher returned. Jackpot, I whispered to Iris. She took my journal. That's theft, Iris pointed out. That's evidence, I corrected her with a smile that would have made my therapist very concerned about my mental state. Fletcher came back upstairs with Warren Griffin, the insurance investigator who looked exactly like his voice on the phone suggested, like a basset hound in a JCPenney suit. Sorry to disturb you during this difficult time, Mr. Calloway, Warren said, his tone suggesting this was his 4th grieving spouse visit of the day. Just need to clarify a few details about your wife's passing. Aubrey awkwardly stood in the corner, trying to look like a supportive friend, rather than someone who had just been rifling through a dead woman's possessions. This is Aubrey, my colleague, Fletcher introduced her with an unconvincing professional nod. She's been helping me manage during this difficult time. Warren's expression didn't change, but somehow his eyebrows conveyed that he'd seen this scenario play out about 1,000 times in his 27 years at Regional Life Insurance. I see, he said, pulling out a form. Now, regarding the circumstances of Mrs. Calloway's death, Fletcher launched into the elaborate story he'd concocted. A hiking accident in Vermont, a tragic fall, local authorities handling everything. His performance deserved a Razzie for Worst Actor in a straight-to-Netflix drama. And the body? Warren asked, making a note. Cremated, Fletcher replied smoothly. It was what she would have wanted. How convenient, I said to my phone screen. Cremated before anyone could verify I had a pulse. And you have the death certificate? Fletcher's confident facade cracked slightly. It's being processed. The Vermont authorities said it might take a few days because of the unusual circumstances. Warren nodded, writing something down that made Fletcher shift uncomfortably. We'll need that certificate, of course, along with the police report from the Vermont authorities. Absolutely, Fletcher agreed, sweat now visible on his forehead. Just waiting for the paperwork. As they continued talking, I texted Noah Sinclair, the private detective I'd hired. Insurance investigator at the house now. Fletcher claiming VT authorities handling everything. Cremation. No death certificate yet. Noah's reply came instantly. Perfect. Vermont officials deny any reports of hiking accidents matching your description from the weekend. He's digging his own grave. I smiled, feeling the first genuine happiness since discovering my premature obituary. Speaking of graves, I texted back, are we all set for Saturday's memorial? All arranged, he replied. Griffin is on board too. Operation Resurrection is a go. Iris looked over my shoulder at the exchange. You know, most people would just file for divorce. I turned to my sister with the serene smile of someone who had transcended mere marital dissolution. Divorce is for the living, Iris. And according to the Bedford Falls Gazette, I'm very much dead. I raised my wine glass in a toast to the phone screen, where Fletcher was now awkwardly escorting Warren to the door. But I promise you this, my resurrection is going to be absolutely killer. By Thursday afternoon, my death had become Bedford Falls's hottest topic since the high school principal was caught selling homemade kombucha with a suspicious alcohol content at the farmer's market. My inbox overflowed with condolence emails from colleagues who apparently couldn't be bothered to call my emergency contacts. The Hudson Valley-style Instagram posted a black square with my initials, the lazy person's grief equivalent of sending thoughts and prayers. "Look at this," I told Iris, showing her my phone. Cynthia from the art department wrote, "Heaven gained an angel," with the crying emoji. She literally called me editorial Stalin last month because I rejected her cursive font choice. "The death industrial complex at work," Iris replied, handing me a fresh mug of coffee. "Nothing like a colleague's demise to boost social media engagement." I was about to respond when a text from Detective Noah Sinclair lit up my phone. "Check your email. Found something interesting." The email contained a video attachment and a brief message. "Security footage from the Landing Hotel last Friday night. Your husband checked in under Frank Carson, paid cash but used his actual credit card for room service." "Frank Carson?" Iris raised an eyebrow. "That's the most generic alias ever. It's like calling yourself John Smith, but somehow even more boring." "It's from the protagonist in his unpublished detective novel," I explained. "The one he's been working on for 7 years that's still just an outline in 3 paragraphs. The video showed Fletcher and Aubrey entering the boutique hotel that was conveniently located 3 blocks from our house. Aubrey was carrying an overnight bag. My overnight bag, the Longchamp tote I'd bought in Paris that Fletcher had claimed was stolen from the coat check at his company Christmas party. "He gave her my Longchamp," I gasped, more offended by this theft than the actual affair. "That's a $300 bag he said was stolen. I filed an insurance claim." "Focus, Marlowe," Iris said, rewinding the video. "Look at what she's carrying in her other hand." It was a manila folder thick with papers, labeled clearly even on the grainy security footage. Insurance. "They were planning this," I whispered, feeling a strange combination of vindication and nausea. "The hotel meetup was the night before I left for Vermont. And the insurance policy activated the day after you died," Iris added, connecting the dots faster than a Facebook algorithm tracking shopping habits. Noah's email included one more crucial detail. "Fletcher accessed your cloud storage last week and downloaded copies of your birth certificate, passport scan, and social security card." Identity theft on top of regular theft and fake death? "He's going for the felony trifecta," I muttered, feeling my rage crystallize into something sharper, more focused. "What's the plan now?" Iris asked. I pulled out the notebook where I'd been outlining Operation Resurrection, with the same meticulous attention I usually reserved for the magazine's fall fashion issue. "Noah has secured video evidence of Fletcher and Aubrey's hotel rendezvous, plus documentation of the insurance timing," I explained. "Warren Griffin is ready to accidentally arrive early to the memorial service with his fraud investigation team, but we need more." I opened my laptop to show Iris what I'd discovered digging through our shared cloud drive, something Fletcher apparently hadn't considered when plotting my demise. "Fletcher's been embezzling from his company," I explained, displaying spreadsheets and suspicious bank transfers. "He's been skimming from the marketing budget for months. Small amounts, but they add up to nearly $50,000. "How did you figure this out?" Iris looked impressed. "Remember when he insisted I help him organize his files last Christmas? I found discrepancies between reported expenses and actual receipts. I thought he was just terrible at bookkeeping, but now it's clear he's been building a getaway fund." I clicked to another folder. "And here's the piece de resistance. He's been looking at properties in Costa Rica. Non-extradition country, beautiful beaches, perfect for a marketing executive with a stolen identity, and his much younger girlfriend." "Damn, Marlowe," Iris whispered. "You're like Jessica Fletcher meets the Count of Monte Cristo." Except I'm not waiting decades for my revenge," I replied, checking our home security app again. Fletcher was in our home office, frantically searching through file cabinets. Aubrey stood in the doorway looking nervous. "Can't find the original policy," he was saying, tossing papers aside. "Warren wants to see it tomorrow." "Can't you download another copy?" Aubrey suggested. "It has to be the original with signatures," Fletcher snapped. "Otherwise, they'll delay payment even longer." I smirked, opening my purse to reveal the insurance policy in question, safely tucked away in a folder. I'd removed it from our files before leaving for Vermont, not because I suspected anything, but because I'd planned to review the coverage details during my trip. "Looking for this, darling?" I asked the screen, waving the document like a trophy. My phone rang. Noah Sinclair calling with an update. "I've got news," he said without preamble. "Your husband just applied for an expedited passport under your name. Used the documents he downloaded from your cloud storage." "How is that even possible?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "Don't they need me in person?" He claimed it was a replacement for a damaged passport. Submitted everything online with your electronic signature, which he apparently had access to from your shared accounts. "That's next-level identity theft," Iris muttered, looking increasingly concerned. "It gets worse," Noah continued. "I had my contact at the bank check your joint accounts. Fletcher emptied them yesterday, all $87,000. The room seemed to tilt slightly. This wasn't just an insurance scam anymore. Fletcher was setting up his complete disappearance, with my identity and our money. "The memorial is in 2 days," Noah reminded me. "If we're going to catch him before he runs, that's our window." After hanging up, I turned to Iris, my shock hardening into determination. "We need to accelerate the plan. He's not just trying to cash in on my death, he's planning to vanish with everything." "What do we do?" Iris asked. I pulled up the seating chart I'd been designing for my memorial service, because of course I'd want the perfect arrangement for my grand return from the dead. "First, I need you to contact Fletcher's parents," I said. "Tell them you've been trying to reach Fletcher about funeral arrangements, but he's not answering. Say you're worried about his mental state." "Howard and Vivian Calloway," Iris nodded. "The ones who gave him that ridiculous world's greatest son coffee mug he keeps on his desk?" "The very same," I confirmed. "They adore their precious boy and have no idea he's a sociopathic fraud. Let's make sure they have front row seats to his downfall." Next, I called Warren Griffin, who was surprisingly enthusiastic about catching Fletcher in the act. Apparently, insurance investigators lived for moments like these. "Your husband has set off every red flag in our fraud detection system," Warren explained. "No death certificate, conflicting stories about where the death occurred, and an insurance policy that activated suspiciously close to the claim death date. It's like insurance fraud bingo." "And you're sure you can get a warrant by Saturday?" I asked. "Already in process. We've coordinated with local police. They'll arrive about 15 minutes into the service, right after your husband gives his eulogy." The final piece fell into place when Noah texted that he'd confirmed 2 crucial details. Fletcher had booked one-way tickets to San Jose, Costa Rica for Sunday morning, under the names Frank and Aubrey Carson, and Aubrey had given notice at work effective immediately due to personal reasons. I sat back in Iris's armchair, looking at the elaborate plan we'd constructed. Part of me felt a twinge of sadness at how thoroughly my marriage had disintegrated without me noticing. Another, larger part felt an almost electric anticipation for what would happen at Riverside Community Center on Saturday afternoon. "You know," Iris said, studying my expression, "most people who discover their spouse is cheating just key their car or cut holes in their clothes." I smoothed the seating chart, placing Warren Griffin and the police detective strategically near the exit doors to block any potential escape attempts. "Most people aren't pronounced dead by their husband while they're still very much alive," I replied, with a smile that would have made a shark reconsider its life choices. "Besides, I'm not just getting revenge. I'm getting a story that will bump our magazine's readership by at least 30%. I picked up my phone to make one final call to Monica Lawson, my supposedly best friend who hadn't bothered to verify my death. "Monica?" "It's Marlo," I said when she answered, savoring her stunned silence. "Yes, that Marlo. Not quite as dead as advertised. Listen, I need you at my memorial service on Saturday. Front row, if you don't mind. Wear something nice. There's going to be a photographer." As I hung up, Iris looked at me with newfound respect. "Remind me never to cross you." "Don't worry," I assured her, closing my laptop with a satisfying click. I save my best revenge for those who truly deserve it. And Fletcher's performance at my memorial deserves nothing less than a standing ovation and handcuffs. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect early autumn weather usually reserved for wedding photo shoots and cider donut commercials. The irony wasn't lost on me. My fake funeral had better weather than my actual wedding day, which had featured a surprise thunderstorm that turned my cathedral veil into a wet dish rag. "Are you sure about the dress?" Iris asked as I surveyed myself in her full-length mirror. I'd opted for a fitted black sheath with a dramatic red blazer. Funeral appropriate with a splash of surprise. I'm not dead. "Absolutely," I replied, applying another coat of what the Sephora salesgirl had named Revenge Red Lipstick. Black for the occasion, red for the resurrection. Plus, Fletcher always hated this blazer. Said it was too aggressive for the suburbs. Noah picked us up at precisely 1:30 p.m., giving us time to arrive at the memorial service right at the climactic moment. His car, an understated black sedan that screamed, "I follow cheating spouses for a living," was parked a block away to avoid tipping off any early guests who might recognize Iris's vehicle. "Warren's team is in place," Noah informed us as we drove toward the Riverside Community Center. He's stationed at the back entrance with 2 officers and a representative from Fletcher's company. They've been briefed on the embezzlement evidence. I checked my watch, a vintage Cartier that had been my grandmother's. "What's the timing?" "Memorial starts at 2 p.m. Fletcher is scheduled to begin his eulogy at 2:20. Warren's team will enter at 2:25, and you'll make your entrance at 2:30. The side door will be unlocked. I've arranged for the photographer from the Gazette to be there under the pretense of covering a beloved local editor's memorial." "Perfect," I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm for someone about to crash their own funeral. "And Fletcher's parents?" "Front row, looking appropriately devastated," Noah confirmed. "I did a drive-by earlier. Howard's wearing a suit that's at least 2 sizes too big, and Vivian has enough tissues to stock a Kleenex factory." We parked in the community center's rear lot and slipped into Noah's stakeout position, a janitorial closet with a convenient view of the main hall through a ventilation grate. It wasn't glamorous, but it offered an excellent vantage point of Fletcher standing at the podium, looking the perfect picture of grief in his charcoal suit. The attendance was impressive. At least 60 people filled the chairs. I spotted my entire editorial team, several of Fletcher's colleagues, and most of our neighbors. Monica sat rigidly in the front row beside Fletcher's parents, her face locked in the artificial grief expression she usually reserved for Instagram sympathy posts. "Who's the blonde in the 3rd row?" I whispered to Iris. "The one dabbing her eyes but clearly checking her phone every 30 seconds? "Fletcher's ex from college," Iris whispered back. "Emily something. She commented sending strength with a heart emoji on his Facebook post about your death. She sent a flower arrangement to our wedding with a card that said, 'You'll always be my first love,'" I recalled. Charming that she made time in her schedule for my demise. Fletcher adjusted the microphone, his performance as the grieving widower Oscar-worthy. His voice cracked at precisely the right moments as he spoke about our beautiful years together, and how Marlo would want us to celebrate her life, not mourn her death. "That's rich coming from the man who cleaned out our bank accounts," I muttered. Then came the coup de théâtre. Fletcher dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief, my handkerchief monogrammed by my mother, and revealed his special guest. "I'd like to thank Aubrey Bennett for her extraordinary support during this impossible time," he said, gesturing to Aubrey, who rose from her seat in the 2nd row. "Marlo would be so grateful for your kindness." Aubrey had the audacity to wear a black dress that looked suspiciously like one from my closet. The Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress I'd splurged on for last year's charity gala. "Is that my DVF?" I hissed. "Focus, Marlo," Noah warned. "Warren's team is moving in." Right on cue, the back doors opened. Warren Griffin entered, flanked by 2 police officers and a stern-looking woman in a crisp pantsuit I recognized as Helen Tate, the CFO of Fletcher's company. Fletcher faltered mid-sentence about my generous spirit, his eyes widening as Warren approached the front of the room. "Mr. Calloway," Warren announced, his voice carrying through the stunned audience. "I need to speak with you regarding some concerning discrepancies in your insurance claim." Fletcher's face performed an impressive journey from fake grief to genuine panic in under 3 seconds. This is hardly the time or place," he stammered, looking frantically for an escape route. "I'm afraid it's precisely the time," Warren replied, nodding to the officers. "Especially considering the fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement allegations we're investigating. A collective gasp rippled through the memorial attendees. Howard Calloway stood up, his oversized suit making him look like a child playing dress-up. "What's the meaning of this? My son is grieving." "Is he, though?" I asked, making my entrance through the side door with timing that would make Broadway directors weep with envy. The room exploded in shocked exclamations. Monica actually screamed. Fletcher's mother, Vivian, fainted sideways into Howard's arms, crumpling his already ill-fitting suit further. Fletcher's face drained of all color as he gripped the podium for support. "Marlo? But you're dead?" I supplied helpfully, walking slowly toward the front of the room. "Cremated in Vermont after a tragic hiking accident? That's strange, because I've been in Vermont, but hiking wasn't on the itinerary. Neither was dying." The Gazette photographer was snapping pictures frantically, capturing Fletcher's expression of pure horror as I approached. "You should see your face right now," I told him, stopping directly in front of the podium. "It's the look of someone who just realized he committed fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement for absolutely nothing." Aubrey made a dash for the exit, only to be intercepted by one of the police officers. "Not so fast," he said. "We have some questions about your involvement in the insurance fraud scheme." "I didn't know anything about that," she protested, clutching my DVF dress with white-knuckled hands. "And I certainly didn't know about the embezzlement." Fletcher's head snapped toward her. "Aubrey, don't say another word." "Oh, please let her talk," I encouraged, turning to the audience who sat frozen in collective shock. "She might mention the Costa Rica tickets for tomorrow morning." Under the names Frank and Audrey Carson, very creative, Fletcher, the CFO from Fletcher's company stepped forward, her expression glacial. "Mr. Calloway, we've found evidence that you've diverted approximately $50,000 from the marketing budget into your personal accounts over the past 8 months. "That's a lie," Fletcher sputtered, but his protestations had all the conviction of a toddler denying he ate cookies while covered in chocolate. I removed the insurance policy from my purse. "Looking for this?" I asked, waving it at Fletcher. "The original policy you've been tearing the house apart to find? The one you needed to complete your claim for my very premature death benefit?" Warren took the document, nodding appreciatively. "This completes our fraud investigation file nicely." Vivian Calloway had regained consciousness and was staring at me like I'd risen from the grave, which, from her perspective, was essentially true. "But the obituary," Fletcher said. "Fletcher said a lot of things," I replied gently. "Like how he had business trips to Scottsdale when he was actually taking Monica Lawson there for romantic getaways." All eyes turned to Monica, who looked like she wanted to melt into her sensible beige pumps. "It was just once," she squeaked, which was both a confession and obviously a lie. "And Emily," I continued, addressing Fletcher's college ex who was now frantically gathering her purse. "Those late-night work calls from Fletcher weren't about marketing strategies, were they?" Emily froze halfway to standing, then slowly sank back into her chair. "Fletcher," Howard Calloway's voice trembled with disbelief. "What have you done? He faked my death to collect insurance money, emptied our joint accounts of $87,000, planned to flee to Costa Rica with my identity and his intern, and has been systematically cheating with at least 3 women that I know of," I summarized helpfully. "Also, he gave away my designer clothes without permission, which feels like a lesser crime but still hurts." The officers moved toward Fletcher, who was now ashen-faced and sweating profusely. "Fletcher Calloway," the lead officer began, "you're under arrest for insurance fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, and embezzlement." As they handcuffed him, Fletcher finally found his voice. "Marlo, you don't understand. We were having problems. I was going to send money back to you once I was settled." "Save it for your lawyer," I suggested, watching as they escorted him and a sobbing Aubrey toward the exit. Though I'd recommend one who specializes in multiple felonies, rather than the guy who handled our wills. The memorial hall erupted into chaos as people processed what they'd witnessed. Warren approached with a satisfied smile. "Mrs. Calloway, that was the most efficient fraud bust I've overseen in 27 years at Regional Life." "Happy to help," I replied. "Though I'd appreciate if you'd drop the Mrs. I don't think I'll be keeping the name." Iris appeared at my side. handing me a glass of what was supposed to be memorial reception punch, but that she'd clearly spiked with the emergency flask she kept in her purse. "Best funeral ever," she declared, clinking her glass against mine. "Though technically it wasn't yours after all." "Oh, but it was," I corrected her, watching as Fletcher was placed in the back of a police car. "It was the funeral of my marriage, Fletcher's career, and his freedom all at once." Howard and Vivian approached cautiously, like they were afraid I might actually be a ghost. "Marlo," Howard began, his voice cracking. "We had no idea." "Of course you didn't," I assured them, genuinely sympathetic to their shock. Fletcher was very convincing. He convinced me too, for 12 years. Vivian clutched my hands, tears streaming down her face. "What can we do?" "You can stop blaming yourselves," I told them, "and maybe reconsider that world's greatest son mug." As the chaos settled and the stunned attendees began to disperse, Noah approached with news. "The bank has frozen the accounts Fletcher emptied. They should be able to recover most of the money." "That's good," I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of everything. "Though somehow I don't think we'll be splitting assets equally in the divorce." "I'd say you have the upper hand in negotiations," Noah observed dryly. The Gazette reporter approached, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Calloway, would you be willing to give a statement about what just happened?" I looked around the memorial hall, at the flowers purchased for my non-existent funeral, at the enlarged photo of me that Fletcher had selected, from our honeymoon when I still believed in happily ever after, at the shocked faces of friends and colleagues processing the spectacular implosion they'd just witnessed. "Actually," I said, a smile spreading across my face, "I think I'll write this story myself." 3 months after my spectacular resurrection, life had settled into a new normal that was anything but normal. My byline, Marlo Bennett, reclaiming my maiden name faster than Fletcher could say plea bargain, now accompanied the most read column in Hudson Valley Styles history. Dead Wife Walking, When Your Spouse Decides to Kill You Off. The first installment had crashed our website within hours of publication. Turns out, nothing boosts readership like a first-person account of attending your own funeral and watching your husband being hauled away in handcuffs. I sat in my new apartment overlooking the Hudson River, sipping coffee from a mug Iris had custom-made that read, "Technically Immortal." My phone buzzed with a text from Noah Sinclair, who had transitioned from private investigator to something more personal in the aftermath of Fletcher Gate. Court update? Fletcher got denied bail. Again. I smiled into my coffee. Fletcher's legal situation had gone from bad to catastrophic when the financial investigation revealed he'd been embezzling from 3 previous employers too. The prosecutor had used the phrase, "pattern of sophisticated fraud," so many times during the preliminary hearing that it could have been a drinking game. My doorbell rang. Iris arriving for our weekly Sunday brunch tradition, carrying a bakery box from that ridiculously overpriced patisserie she loved. "You're going to die when you see what I found," she announced, dropping her purse on my counter. She paused, wincing at her choice of words. "Sorry, poor phrasing." "It's fine," I laughed. "Death jokes are fair game when you've been legally deceased." She pulled out her phone, showing me Fletcher's latest prison video call with Aubrey. I'd never explicitly asked how Iris gained access to these recordings, and she'd never volunteered the information. Some sisters share clothes. We shared surveillance footage. "Watch his face when she tells him," Iris instructed, hitting play. On screen, Fletcher looked considerably less polished than the man who'd once lectured me about the importance of maintaining appearances when I suggested wearing jeans to a neighborhood barbecue. His prison-issued attire clashed spectacularly with his country club sensibilities. "Lawyer says I might be able to get immunity if I testify," Aubrey was saying, her perfect Gen Z skin now stress-broken out around her chin. "About everything, Fletcher. The embezzlement, the insurance fraud, the identity theft." Fletcher's expression collapsed like a souffle in a slammed oven. "You can't do that, Aubrey. We had a plan." "Your plan put me in an orange jumpsuit for 2 weeks," she hissed, leaning toward the camera. "Do you know what happens to your skin in county lockup? They don't exactly provide drunk elephant moisturizer in the commissary." I couldn't help but laugh. Her priorities remain impeccable. "Here's the best part," Iris said, fast-forwarding slightly. "And one more thing," Aubrey continued on screen, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "I sold the tell-all rights to my story. The Other Woman, How I Almost Escaped with America's Dumbest Fraudster." "You did what?" Fletcher's face contorted in horror. "Netflix documentary series," Aubrey smirked. "They're thinking 6 episodes. Don't worry, I used your good side in the photos I provided. The left one, where you don't have that weird ear thing." The call ended with Fletcher repeatedly yelling Aubrey's name as she disconnected with a little finger wave. "I almost feel sorry for him," I mused, reaching for a chocolate croissant from the bakery box. "Almost?" Iris raised an eyebrow. "Almost in the way you almost feel bad when a cartoon villain falls off a cliff after trying to drop an anvil on someone," I clarified. Theoretical sympathy that evaporates immediately when you remember context. My phone chimed with an email notification. The final divorce decree had been processed. Despite Fletcher's current address being the Bedford Falls Correctional Facility, the divorce proceedings had been surprisingly straightforward. When your soon-to-be ex is facing 15-20 years for multiple felonies involving your faked death, judges tend to be sympathetic to your property requests. "It's official," I told Iris, holding up my phone. "I am officially uncallowayed. Congratulations on your divorce from the worst criminal mastermind in upstate New York," Iris said, raising her coffee mug and toast. "Please, he wasn't even the worst criminal mastermind on our block," I corrected. "Remember when the Henderson's son tried to counterfeit $20 bills using green construction paper and a photocopier? At least Justin Henderson was 8 years old, not 42 with a Stanford MBA," Iris pointed out. I laughed, but felt a familiar pang of retrospective embarrassment. How did I not see it, Iris? 12 years of marriage, and I had no idea I was living with someone capable of faking my death for insurance money. Because normal people don't expect their partners to be practicing amateur obituary writing in their spare time, Iris replied. Hindsight makes fools of us all. Still, I sighed, scrolling through the divorce document. There were signs, the secret phone calls, the mysterious weekend conferences that never seemed to generate any email trails, the way he insisted we upgrade our life insurance right before my accident. "You know what Fletcher's biggest mistake was?" Iris asked, licking chocolate from her fingers. "Besides the obvious felonies." "What?" "Underestimating you," she said simply. "He thought you were just another suburban wife who'd be too overwhelmed by grief to notice discrepancies in his story." I nodded, thinking about the women who'd approached me after my story broke. Other wives and girlfriends who'd spotted the warning signs of infidelity and fraud, but second-guessed themselves into silence. My inbox had become a confessional for women who'd been gaslit by partners, made to feel crazy for asking questions about missing money or unexplained absences. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Warren Griffin, carrying a large envelope and looking considerably more cheerful than when we'd first spoken. "The insurance check," he announced without preamble, handing me the envelope. Not the death benefit, obviously, but the fraud victim compensation, plus interest. I invited him in for coffee, which he accepted with the enthusiasm of someone whose daily routine involved more fraudsters than friends. "So what happens now with Fletcher's case?" I asked, pouring him a cup. "He's trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor isn't feeling generous," Warren explained. 5 different charges across 3 jurisdictions, plus the attempted identity theft for the passport fraud. He'll be lucky to see daylight before he qualifies for senior discounts. "And Aubrey?" Iris asked. "Rolled over faster than a trained dog," Warren said with professional admiration. "Gave up everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. She'll probably get probation, maybe a few months in minimum security. She's already signed with a literary agent." "Of course she has," I muttered, probably using my stolen moleskin notebook to draft chapters. After Warren left, Iris helped me hang the final touches in my new apartment. Framed covers of the magazine issues containing my Dead Wife column series. The latest featured a stylized illustration of me rising phoenix-like from memorial flowers, with the headline, "Resurrection and Reinvention, Building a New Life After Being Declared Dead." "Have you heard from Fletcher's parents?" Iris asked as we adjusted the frame. "Howard calls every few weeks to apologize for raising a criminal mastermind without the mastermind part," I said. Vivian sends care packages with homemade cookies and self-help books with titles like When Bad Men Happen to Good Women and Healing from Marital Betrayal. That's oddly sweet, Iris observed. It is, I agreed. They're decent people who are mortified by their son's actions. I've assured them they're not responsible for Fletcher's moral compass going haywire in middle age. My phone buzzed with a text from Monica Lawson. Her weekly attempt at reconciliation, which I continued to ignore with the serene patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Literally. When you've already died once, on paper, you become remarkably selective about who gets access to your second life. The Hudson Valley-style team had embraced my strange celebrity status, turning my personal catastrophe into our most successful editorial pivot in years. My editor's letter now closed with, "Very much alive and thriving," which had become something of a personal mantra. That evening, Noah came over for dinner, bringing case files for the book we were co-authoring, Playing Dead Inside the World of Faked Deaths and Insurance Fraud. It turned out my experience was surprisingly common, if usually less dramatically resolved. Your case study is still my favorite, Noah admitted as we spread documents across my dining table. Most insurance fraudsters at least make sure their spouse is out of cell phone range before declaring them dead. Fletcher always did think he was the smartest person in the room, I reflected. That's usually a fatal flaw in both Greek tragedies and criminal enterprises. As Noah organized interview transcripts, I stepped onto my small balcony overlooking the river, watching the sunset paint the water copper and gold. There was something poetic about having a view like this after years in a suburban house where the most exciting vista was the Johnsons' meticulous lawn care schedule in action. A year ago, I'd been Marlo Calloway, comfortably married magazine editor, blissfully unaware that my husband was plotting my paper demise while embezzling from his company and sleeping with my friends. I'd been living what I thought was a good life, never questioning the occasional inconsistencies or convenient explanations. Now I had a new name, a new home, a successful column, a book deal, and perhaps most importantly, a finely tuned bullshit detector that would make airport security scanners seem imprecise by comparison. Fletcher had tried to write my ending, publishing my obituary without consulting the main character of the story. His critical error wasn't just the fraud or the embezzlement or even the cheating. It was assuming he controlled the narrative. But here's the thing about stories. They belong to the people who live them, not the people who try to edit them without permission. Fletcher tried to reduce me to a plot device in his escape fantasy. Instead, he became a cautionary tale in mine. I raised my wine glass to the setting sun, toasting my own unexpected resurrection and the sweet justice of Fletcher's downfall. Here's to living well, I whispered to the horizon. It really is the best revenge, especially when you get to watch your would-be murderer's booking photo go viral on Twitter. Somewhere in the Bedford Falls Correctional Facility, Fletcher Calloway was eating mystery meatloaf in an orange jumpsuit, wondering how his perfect plan had imploded so spectacularly. And I was here, very much alive, with a second chance at a first-rate life. It turns out that sometimes you have to die, at least on paper, to truly learn how to live.